Now, when I've been speaking to friends lately, when it comes to political stuff, I try and get my friends and my colleagues and acquaintances to think a little bit deeper and think beyond the kind of surface narrative that we tend to get from the media and from politicians and so on. And it's kind of a struggle. I mean, most of my social circle and friends and so on are they're fairly bright people and they have an idea of what's going on, but most of them have a tendency to just accept the surface narrative, like to accept the premise they're given by RTE and News Talk and Today FM and so forth. And they don't really question too much beyond that. Most of them now, one or two do, but the majority don't. And it really is quite difficult to break through that veneer, that sort of to go below the surface with people and to really get them thinking about things. It's like you need to be so careful because I guess people do tend to jump to conclusions. Like, for instance, if you talk about something like, mass migration, for instance, people are kind of conditioned, they're kind of programmed to think of you as maybe some sort of bad person, as some sort of cold hearted person, if you question in any way the whole premise of mass immigration into Western Europe, for instance, you know. And the way I work with this as is that I try to get them to really see what this is all about. And this is all about enriching, the top few percent of society, the corporate people, solicitors, media people, politicians, and so on. So certain vested interests. It's about enriching them. It's not about helping people. It's about getting cheap labor into the country, outsourcing labor to cheaper countries where it can be done cheaply, making big profits for businesses, and driving up rents and excuse me, and house prices. That is all that mass immigration is about. That is what it's about. It's not about helping folks. It's not about helping people. I know a lot of people are under that impression. Oh, this is all about helping poor people, helping people from poorer parts of the world, letting them get out of poverty and get into the first world where they can make a good life for themselves. It's really not about that. That's just a byproduct, okay? And the media would like you to think that that's what it's about. It's not. It's about enriching certain vested interests. It's about enriching people in the diversity stroke asylum industry. That is what it's about. And like I said, people don't like to think that this is true. Because if this is true, then they've been lied to their whole life. They've been lied to their whole life by, the people who give them these messages, the media people, the politicians, people who work in universities, people who work in education, um, you know, the sort of entertainment industry and so forth, the public sphere. So many people have lied to them, and most people cannot accept that fact. It's too frightening in a way to accept, to think that you've been lied to your whole life. People simply cannot, they're not prepared to accept that fact. So therefore, it's easier to call people like me intolerant or someone that just doesn't like outsiders or foreigners or whatever. That's the easy thing to do. The harder thing to do, the more challenging thing to do, is to accept the points that I make and just think about it. Do your research, look into it. Is there something to this? And if you do your research outside of the sort of mainstream news sources, you will find there is something to it. And it does make sense. And it does add up. And sadly, it's not about helping people. It's about enriching these vested interests, the top few percent of society. The bankers, that's another sector as well, I forgot to mention. They're also a big part of this. People who are seriously invested in the property industry, of course, they stand to gain as well from increasing rents and house prices and so on. And An example of this would be, direct provision in Ireland, and so few people are willing to accept this idea that this is not about helping people. It is simply about getting more people into the country, people who will eventually become consumers, who will spend. You can tax that spending therefore more money for the government. You know, more money for bankers because then you can give loans to these people and so on. Solicitors get all these cases coming from repeat applications for asylum and so on. This is what it's about. This is why we have mass immigration. This is why we have the asylum industry. This is why we have it. It's to enrich the top few percent of society. It is not about helping people. And I just wish that people would start to think about that, start to realize that, you know, I'm trying to get my friends to wake up to this fact. Some of them are starting to wake up a little bit, but a lot of them are still closed to this idea. They cannot accept it, you know. And they're not prepared to accept that, you know, Irish people deserve to be treated right too. European people deserve to be treated right too. We don't deserve to have our rights walked over. You know, that's hardly fair. How is that fair? But this seems to be something in the Irish psyche and a bit in the European psyche as well. This kind of guilt thing. You know, we can. It's perfectly fine to allow ourselves to be walked over if we can feel like we're helping people from less well-off places. That is the mindset. It's so deep in our psyche, and I just wish people could unplug from that, wake up from that. Yes, it's good to look after people from outside places who are less well off and less privileged. Yes, I agree. But don't walk all over Irish people. Don't walk all over European people in the process. That's my point here. And wake up. Look at what's happening. All of this mass immigration and refugees, asylum seekers, for the most part, is about enriching the top few percent of society. It is not about helping people. That's what I'm saying, folks. Think about it. Look into it. Do your research. You'll find that I'm right.